just jam it into their face. Get down the back of the cell with your face to the wall. My name is Noel Smith. For much of my life I was known as Razor. I was an armed robber in London for over 35 years, spent 32 years in prison, and I'm now editor of the prison magazine Inside Time. I was the only one arrested. None of my pals were ever nicked for it. They never knew who they were. And I was standing there on my own at the age of 47 or 49, and you hear a judge up there giving you 8 life sentences plus 80 years in concurrent sentences, and he's actually saying in his summing up that he hopes you're never released. You kind of figure your life is over, you know, I mean, that is a turning point. I just thought to myself, this is it. You know, that's the end of it. I'm going to die in prison. Got to say, apart from all the peeling ceiling, this is a typical prison cell, really. I mean, I've been in so many of these, it's unreal. Sometimes in a cell this size, you'll have 3 people. So you might have bunk beds on that side of the wall, single bed this side. But it is pretty much the same as most cells. I mean, you know, these were all put in at a later stage, the sinks and the toilets. At one stage, this wouldn't have had any sink and toilet, it would have been a bare cell. And I've got to say, there are cells in the system in about 20 different prisons that are even smaller than this. Probably around about half the size, the length of a bed is the size of the cell, and they can't put toilets in them. This is actually the segregation unit, or as we used to call it in the old days before PC, the punishment block, because it's where you're taken to do your punishment. And you would spend your time alone in this cell, or a cell very similar to this, with absolutely nothing. There is a toilet in the cell now. 20 years ago there wouldn't have been a toilet in the sink. It would have been just a bed, a table, a chair and a piss pot. There was a rule of silence down there, so you couldn't sing, you couldn't whistle, you couldn't speak. The only person you saw were the officers who came and put your meals into the cell. You got exercise every 2 weeks for half an hour. You got a shower every 2 weeks. And basically it was a bit of a dire existence, to be honest with you. It was a bit of a living hell. They tell you before they come through, they shout through the door, get down the back of the cell with your face to the wall. If you didn't comply, you wouldn't get fed. So the prisoner would be standing at the back wall with his face to the wall, and the screws would use a broom handle to push the meal in on a plastic plate. And there it would lay amongst all the excrement. And once that was done, and that's all you heard 3 times a day was that, and then, boom, they're gone. When you think that the most dangerous people in the outside world, GBH merchants, murderers, people who would take your eye out without a reason, they end up in prison. So you end up with, instead of one in your neighbourhood, you end up with everybody next door to you, all packed in like this, and you never know who people are, and you can't take a risk in prison. The creed of prison violence is do it first and do it fast. So, and do it and proper put them out the game, because if you don't put someone out of the game, they're coming back on the wing and it's going to start again. So you've got to really hurt somebody so that they get shipped to hospital and outside the prison, otherwise they're coming back at you tomorrow. And that's how you live in prison, paranoid, brutal and violent. There's a thing called jerking, which is when you get 3 or 4 of you with sharp weapons, sharp pointed weapons, and you just steam into one person and stab them as many times as you can, leaving them with 1,000. It's called teabagging, really. Teabagging is a different thing out here, I know. In prison, teabagging is stabbing people many times, leaving 1,000 perforations. That's where it comes from, teabagging. But hot water with sugar, every prison landing had a boiler. I don't see one here, it would have been over there. And you get boiling water out of this to make tea, coffee, whatever. And what a lot of prisoners used to do was, if they really wanted to hurt someone, fill up their 2-pint jug, plastic jug, with hot water, boiling water out of it, pour a pound of sugar into it, throw it over somebody, it strips the skin and sticks to your face. It really is a horrific weapon. Anything you find in a prison can be turned into a weapon. I mean, this was a favourite. This is a prison food tray. Everyone will be issued with one of these at meal times. Now this is stainless steel, it weighs quite a bit, and I've seen many people have their head split open with these. Just crack them, A favourite trick in the old days in Borstal was to hold your tray like that if you were going to do someone who was sitting down, and that edge there is very sharp, and just jam it into their face. If someone wanted to get you and you were in this shower, I mean, take a look at it, it's pretty isolated. There's enough room for 2 people in here, maybe 3 if you're lucky. Now imagine you're standing there naked, having a shower, and 3 guys in masks come through, fully clothed, and start stabbing you in the showers, which is what they normally do. They'll get you when you're naked, they know you've got no weapon with you, because you're naked. And that's the most dangerous time in prison, is when you're naked in the shower. Not because somebody wants to have sex with you, no, it's because somebody wants to hurt you severely. So this is the best time to do it. When you're vulnerable, preferably when you've just started washing your hair and the shampoo's in your eyes, they will be over at the door and they'll come flying in and boom, that'll be it. I mean, I can almost guarantee underneath some of these paint there's going to be blood stains on these walls, because there is in most prison showers. I think this is the kitchens. Now, a lot of people would have liked to work in these places, but they're also very dangerous. Apart from the slop they put out that prisoners had to eat, there was a lot of knives and stuff like that kept in here. And in fact, in Parkhurst prison a few years ago, a guy was stabbed to death in the kitchens, a murderer, with a carving knife by a sex offender. If you work in the kitchens, you don't have to eat the slop you put out, you make your own food. You know, you make it to how you like it, so you're all right. It's a case of well, I'm all right, Jack. And basically, I've seen people stirring the big tea urns or the porridge urns and just spitting in it casually. You know what I mean? The only way they could keep you out of the kitchens was if you had a blood-related disease that you could poison the whole prison. If you had hepatitis, they wouldn't let you in work in the kitchens, although I do know people with hepatitis who work in the kitchens. If you had HIV or AIDS, you couldn't work in the kitchens. And that was in case, and a lot of people would. You've got to imagine there's a lot of mad people, there's a lot of bad people and insane people in prison, and people with HIV would have no problem cutting their finger and dripping blood into your food. They do it to the sex offenders, you know, and it was just one of those things. And I mean, what you've got to take from that is prisoners, on the whole, are not really, you know, entirely balanced people. They're in prison for a reason. And doing strange things, especially with the people who have mental illnesses, is kind of de rigueur for them, you know, it's standard. So you could end up with someone in a prison working in the kitchens who's got HIV and is dripping his blood regularly into the food in the hope of contaminating everybody else. It happens. The thing you've got to take on board is prison is so paranoid. Prisoners are so paranoid, and we're all stuck in this one little small place, and it looks massive on film, but seriously, this is a small area, the whole prison, and you never go anywhere, and you're all there. So the paranoia is absolutely tremendous, and you never know when someone's plotting up on you, or someone wants to stab you, or someone wants to scold you. So everybody's in a heightened state of awareness. So all someone has to do is make a loud noise and it all kicks off. You know, that's the thing about prison. It's a very violent place and a very paranoid place as well. Gradually over the last, say, 5 or 6 years, legal highs, they're not legal highs anymore, but say synthetic opiates and synthetic cannabis in prison has become massive. It's easy to smuggle in, it's cheap, and it's changed so much that what they do now, they get the wing numpty or the wing junkie, they get a parcel in, and they'll find an idiot on the wing and say, come here, do you want some spice? And they'll test it on them. So what they do is they give it to them and they watch what happens to them. And if the guy like flies out of the cell, which they quite often do, and jumps over the landing, which is pretty common, down onto the netting, even though that will stop you dying, it won't stop you breaking bones or being seriously hurt, because that's steel wire. So then they find out, you know, what the strength of it is and what it's going to do to you, and then they'll sell it around the prison. So I believe there's been something like 69 deaths in the last 2 years from legal highs in prison, which, when you think about it, people should be screaming up. 69 people have died in our prisons down to smoking legal highs, or illegal highs now. So yeah, I mean, drugs in prison are very big. And if you ask yourself, why would anyone need drugs in prison? I've got to tell you, after a 10-hour shift, most prison officers want to go and have a stiff drink. They're in here for 10 hours, supervising. Imagine living in here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, sometimes for decades. I mean, if you're going to only see these walls every day for the next 10 years, you need something when you're behind your door, when you're out, to smash the sameness of prison, just to relieve the boredom. And that's why a lot of prisoners turn to drugs when they come into prison. Well, like you know, the life I've been talking about, it takes something really, really big to kind of shake you out of that. And I was doing my 8 life sentences in Whitemoor Prison in 2001, and I came back from the op plate one night. And if you see any sort of holy man on the landings in prison in the top security jails, like a priest, a vicar, imam, whatever, rabbi, you know that they're there to deliver bad news. They don't come on the landings unless they're there to deliver bad news. It's too dangerous for them. And I came back from the hot plate, and I was with a big Geordie drug dealer called Bud. And just, you know, I sort of elbowed him and I went, look, I see the priest up the end of the land, and I went, someone's in for some bad news. And when I got up to my cell, it turned out it was me. And it was my 19-year-old son, Joseph, that died on the outside. And I was devastated, obviously. You know, you can't, it's really hard to explain how devastated you are. I mean, when the priest tried to tell me, when I realised that he was coming for me, I just flipped and I said, no. I said, don't talk to me. I said, get away from me. And he went, but I have to tell you. I said, you don't have to tell me nothing. I said, well, go away. I said, get out of my cell. Anyway, off he went and closed it. He got a screw to close the door and then told me through the closed door in case I attacked him. So I asked to be let out, went to the phoned up my ex-wife, and it turned out it was true. And then, I mean, that was kind of bad enough. I started thinking to myself, you know, I'm stuck in a top security prison, one of the diamond geezers walking around giving it a pig, and my son is dead outside and I can't comfort my family. So then the next step was I had to try and apply to go to my son's funeral, and I went to it turned out the security governor in Whitemoor at the time had been a member of staff in Rochester 25 years previous, and I had actually broken his mate's jaw, and he hated me for it, and he always used to dig me out, and I had to go to this man and beg him to be allowed out for my son's funeral, and he took great pleasure in making me beg and then saying no. And I went away and I thought about it, and I thought, you know, I've spent all these years in prison building myself up as this ogre, you know, attacking prison officers, starting riots, trying to cause trouble everywhere I went, and then I want something from them. And they're within their rights to say no, and I realised I brought it all on myself. This didn't come overnight, I wasn't that logical. This came over a period of thinking over about 3 or 4 weeks whilst I was in grief. And what happened was, as is the usual case, the prisoners heard about it on my wing. All seriously dangerous men, I mean, household names. And they come down and said, it's a liberty, they're not letting you go to the funeral. So what we're going to do is, on the day of the funeral, we're going to attack the screws, you know, in honour of your son. And I said, well, what's that? They said, we're going to get a load of washing up liquid, spread it all over the landing. He said, we're all going to get armed, then we're going to ring the riot belt, and when the screws come running on and they fall over, we're going to steam in and we'll do as many as we can. And I could see they was doing it like as a sort of tribute, you know. This sounds weird, tribute, but they were doing it sort of for me to show solidarity. And I thought about it overnight, and then I thought, no. I said, I don't want my legacy, my son's legacy, to be a load of prison officers being bashed up in Whitemoor prison. So I had to think in another way then, and it was that, my son's death, for not being allowed to go to the funeral, that actually made me, you know, reevaluate my life and find out, you know, where I was going and what was happening. Don't forget, at that time I thought I was never getting out of prison, but I still had the urge to kind of change my ways, sort of, because of Joe's death. So that was the real major catalyst that made me change my ways in prison.